Alrighty, so today we're going to be reviewing Ferrari. Ferrari is at a market valuation of $58 billion. Dollars. The luxury brand employs approximately 5,400 to 5,700 people and generates roughly $7.2 billion dollars in annual revenue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off Edward, our positioning intelligence agent, and we are going to hop into this.
Hello, this is Edward. Who am I speaking with?
Hey Edward, you're speaking with Troy. So you and I are going to be reviewing Ferrari today. We're going to be diving into their website, some of their Instagram assets, and overall just kind of tearing apart some of what they have. Are you ready to find the positioning gaps and the revenue leaks?
Troy, let's get into it. Before we start tearing things apart, I want to make sure we're looking at this through the right lens. Quick question to frame this properly. When you say revenue leaks and positioning gaps, are we looking at this from the perspective of Ferrari as a brand trying to grow, or are we analyzing them as a case study to extract positioning lessons that apply to another business or client?
I would say both.
Perfect. That's actually the more interesting angle because Ferrari is one of the most studied positioning cases in the world. But most people only see the surface, the exclusivity, the red, the prancing horse. They miss what's actually engineered underneath. So let me ask you this. When you look at Ferrari's current positioning, what's your gut feeling? Do you think they're leaving money on the table? Or do you think they're playing a near perfect game?
Good question. So I'm going to change my location here. Do I think they're leaving money on the table or are they playing a near perfect game? I believe all of us have room to grow, and I think there's always something that we can do to leverage, analyze, process, improve upon, and figure out where our gaps might be. So I think yeah, they always have they always have room to grow. I think right now they're sitting at about $7.2 billion dollars in annual revenue. I'm sure they could bring that up to 8, 9, 10 billion a year.
That's a sharp instinct. And here's what makes Ferrari fascinating as a case study. Their entire model is built around artificial scarcity. They deliberately produce fewer cars than the market demands. So the traditional revenue growth playbook doesn't apply to them the same way, which means the real question becomes, where does Ferrari grow without diluting the thing that makes Ferrari Ferrari? So let me ask you this. When you looked at their website and their Instagram assets, what was the first thing that felt off to you? Not analytically yet, just emotionally. What didn't land the way you expected it to for a brand at that level?
Emotionally, the first thing that was a little off for me is, I mean, they have a Formula One car here, and that's fine. But the first initial video seemed a little grainy. It doesn't look too bad now, but it seems like a little out of place. But as I go to the second tier of their different cars, these videos are a lot cleaner. So that was the first visual asset that was off point for me. Yeah, that video loads a little funny. Their Instagram looks pretty clean. 32.2 million followers. They're getting quite a bit of views on these videos. So though that's my first judgment is that one main video, that video that they're nailing me with, seems to be a little pixelated. And the same with, and I don't think this is my end. Like if I make this full screen, no, it doesn't seem to change at all. Let's go back here. I mean, I guess this is also them taking high speed photos and then putting them on the front page. So there is a level of that that can contribute to that. So anyways, that's the first like impression for me from a brand that's just selling an emotion. That makes sense. Now I want to go back to their main page, United States. Okay, so okay, start your engine, sports car. Okay, this one looks interesting. So, yeah, let's go into this. I think it. This is interesting. I think the first like primary tab that you should be forced to on the main page is actually the sports car, if that's what's driving the majority of their revenue. You know what? While I mention that, I'm going to pop into Gemini. What drives the majority of their revenue? Is it the sports car or the racing? So I'm pretty sure it will be the sports car, but I could be drastically wrong. Okay, the sale of sports cars and spare parts drives the vast majority of Ferrari's revenue. While Ferrari was originally founded strictly as a racing team that sold road cars only to fund its track activities, the modern commercial business model is heavily inverted. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing that's a little off is if the sports car is the forefront of the website, is this leading me to an easy to understand place? I'm sure they're driving all sorts of traffic to this, and I'm sure they're running ads to these pages. You know what? Yeah, as I mentioned that out loud, can you comment on that while I'm going to look at Facebook ad library?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just identified is actually a positioning architecture problem, not just a navigation problem. Here's what I mean. If sports cars drive the majority of revenue, but the website doesn't create an immediate emotional journey that pulls someone deeper into that world, then the website is functioning as a catalog, not as a desire machine. And for a brand like Ferrari, that's a significant gap. Ferrari's entire power is built on making you feel something before you ever think about buying. So the question becomes, does the website engineer that feeling from the first second, or does it just organize information? While you're pulling up the Facebook ad library, here's what I want you to look for specifically. Are there ads driving traffic to an emotional experience? Or are they driving traffic to a product page? Because those are two completely different positioning strategies. And one of them is leaving serious money on the table. What are you seeing in the ad library?
They're definitely driving emotions, so there's a couple things that come up for me. If I go into, okay, only your Ferrari experience matters. Okay, Ferrari approved, Ferrari 296 GTB, upgrading legacy, unfading legacy, unparalleled experience, outstanding cars. These ads are notoriously simple, so that's good. And they are,
Okay, so that's actually telling. Simple
that this
ads.
sorry, I was just watching one of their ads. This reel's driving quite a bit of emotion. Okay, I like this. I like these reels. Okay, the only one disconnect I would have is like okay, from an ad congruence standpoint, they're showing a wonderful red car. It's an amazing reel. But then when I come to this landing page, it loads on, it took a while for this video to load, but then it's a blue car. So I think like, and this is so simple, but I think carrying through that emotion from the ad as the red car to the red car being on the splash and the landing page does make sense from a congruence standpoint. But there's such a big brand that like, mm, okay, as I scroll down the page, the red is here, but the blue video dominates the top hero. So that's interesting. It's actually I don't want to say surprised, but with the amount of media that you have to produce, okay, so they have different red cars in some of the ads, but I think their primary ads, like so these ad campaigns went out on May 8th. They I'm surprised that they don't have any legacy ads running. I guess these are probably mostly brand campaigns, just to be relevant and aware. But yeah, that's something that comes up for me.
Troy, stop right there, because what you just identified is actually more significant than it sounds on the surface. That color disconnect between the ad and the landing page, that's not a small creative oversight. That's a broken desire chain. Ferrari's entire emotional architecture is built on a specific sensory identity. Red is not just a color for Ferrari. Red is the emotion. Red is the status signal. Red is the category itself. So when someone clicks through in a heightened emotional state from a red car ad and lands on a blue hero video, the desire loop breaks. The brain has to reset. And that reset, even if it's subconscious, costs them conversion momentum. Now, here's the deeper positioning question this raises for me. You mentioned they don't seem to have legacy ads running, only brand relevance campaigns from May 8th. So let me ask you this. Who do you think Ferrari is actually targeting with these ads right now? Because the answer to that question will tell us whether this is a positioning gap or a strategic pivot they're making that we haven't fully decoded yet.
Hmm. Good question. Who do I think that they're targeting? So I think that they're targeting potential either existing customers to upsell new versions of this car, or they're targeting a brand new audience. I don't actually know. Their target their target would likely be, would it be an entrepreneur? Who do you think their target would be?
That's the right question to sit with. And I'll tell you why I'm not going to answer that directly yet, because if we assume the target, we'll build the wrong diagnosis. But here's what the evidence is already telling us. The ads are emotionally driven, they're simple, they launched in May, which suggests a new model push, and they're not running legacy campaigns. That pattern typically signals they're trying to activate a new buyer, not just retain an existing one. So here's what I want you to think about. Ferrari has a waitlist culture. Most serious buyers are already in the ecosystem. So if they're running broad emotional brand ads without legacy positioning, who are they trying to make feel like they belong in a Ferrari for the first time? Because that's a very specific psychological profile. It's not just wealth. Plenty of wealthy people don't buy Ferraris. It's a specific identity type. So let me ask you this, Troy. When you think about the person who buys their first Ferrari, what is the emotional trigger that finally pushes them over the edge? Is it status? Is it self-reward? Is it belonging to a specific tribe? Or is it something else entirely? Because whatever that trigger is, that's where Ferrari's positioning should be sharpest. And that's where we'll find the...
It's absolutely status. When I scroll down the page, there is a bar that pops up, and I noticed this languaging, and this is on one of the landing pages. So your next Ferrari awaits you. So their intent with these ad campaigns, I'm assuming, they're targeting existing Ferrari owners. Okay, this page doesn't have that. Okay, so that might be a retargeting. Let me see if this one, when I scroll down, that comes up. Okay, that's interesting. So I'm assuming they're running these dual, but there is no differentiation in the messaging on the ads themselves. They're depending on the car. They're depending on the beauty of the car. So
Troy, that's a massive find. Let me reflect back what you just uncovered. They're running what appears to be acquisition and retargeting traffic to the same or very similar creative. The only differentiation is the car itself. But the messaging isn't segmented. So a first-time aspirational buyer and an existing Ferrari owner who's ready to upgrade are landing in essentially the same emotional experience. That's a positioning segmentation gap. And here's why that matters at a revenue level. The emotional trigger for a first-time buyer is status and identity entry. The emotional trigger for an existing owner is legacy, evolution, and exclusivity of the next level. Those are two completely different desire architectures. And if you're speaking to both with the same language, you're actually converting neither at full potential. Now, here's what's interesting about the "your next Ferrari awaits" language. That's retention and upsell language. That's relationship language. But if that's appearing to cold traffic who've never owned one, that language actually works as aspiration. It presupposes ownership. It pulls someone into an identity they haven't claimed yet. So the question I have for you, Troy, is this. Do you think that presupposition language is intentional genius on their part? Or is it a happy accident that's actually masking a deeper segmentation problem in their funnel?
I think it really depends on I think it really depends what they're spending on these ads. By the looks of it here, like they're not putting a ton of dough behind these ads. I don't think so. There's 14 ads live. They have a lot of viewership on they have a lot of viewership on Instagram. Hmm. That's interesting. I'm curious what actually drives most of their acquisition. Eh, As I click through to another page, and this is like this is the third. So on their main site, they have F1, they have some racing, then they have sports cars, then the last lineup is new arrivals. And so I went through to that and thinking new arrivals like would actually be cars. Uh, it's fashion. So there's a spring and summer fashion line, and they have all sorts of fashion that they're selling here, which is interesting. Um, like they got $1,100 shoes on here, a $450 bodysuit, $2,300 dress. These are all euros actually, 1950 for a purse. Okay, so they actually have like a very detailed fashion shop here as well. Now, yeah, there's a lot of questions that I have, but I also want your read on some of this too.
Yeah, and the fashion shop is actually a really important data point for this analysis, because now we're seeing something that goes beyond cars. Ferrari is quietly building a lifestyle brand, and that changes the positioning conversation entirely. Because if they're selling purses, apparel, accessories, they're no longer just selling a car. They're selling entry points into the Ferrari identity at multiple price levels, which means their total addressable market just expanded dramatically. Someone who can't afford a $300,000 car can still buy into the Ferrari tribe through a $500 bag or a $200 jacket. But here's the tension that creates from a positioning standpoint. Ferrari's power comes from extreme exclusivity. The moment you make the brand accessible through fashion, you risk diluting the very thing that makes the car desirable. So Troy, here's what I want your read on. When you landed on that fashion section, did it feel like Ferrari? Did the emotional experience match the car pages? Or did it feel like a separate brand that just happened to have the prancing horse on it? Because that gap in brand coherence is where I think one of their biggest positioning risks lives.
It felt like a totally different. Okay, now I can't even get their prices to load on this one page. So it felt like a totally different experience overall. Uh, it has that Paris Fashion Week vibe, which I'm sure that's fine, because they create desire with models and fashion. But like as you were talking through that, like a $2,900, like $2,900 jacket, a $1,700 set of trousers, like these aren't accessible pieces of fashion. Um, yeah, these bags, this bag's 2,200 bucks. So, you know, it felt a little off coming into here. Uh, but I could see where it could appease to a man and a woman in a relationship. Dude gets a car, wife gets a jacket, gets a purse, different things. They kind of they match the brand. They build that desire together. But I'm not really feeling that from these ads. Of course, their dealerships themselves, like how do I say, those probably drive a lot of their revenue if I dig into that.
Troy, let me pull out the two most important things you just said. First, the fashion experience felt disconnected, and the price points you're seeing $2,900 jacket, $1,700 trousers, $2,200 bag those aren't accessible entry points. That's still luxury tier, so they're not actually democratizing the brand. They're creating a parallel luxury lane that doesn't clearly connect back to the car emotionally, which means the fashion line isn't solving the accessibility problem. It's just creating a second expensive thing that competes for attention without reinforcing the core desire architecture around the car. Second, and this is the one I want to press on, you mentioned dealerships probably drive a lot of revenue. And that is a massive positioning blind spot for most people analyzing Ferrari. Because if the dealership experience is where the real conversion happens, then everything on the website and in the ads is essentially top of funnel desire creation. It's not meant to close. It's meant to make someone walk into a dealership already emotionally sold. So here's my question, Troy. If that's the case, if the dealership is the real conversion engine, then what is the website's actual job? And is it currently doing that job well? Or is it trying to do too many things at once and doing none of them exceptionally?
I still think that the sports cars should be front and center because that's what they're known for. The racing's important as a heritage piece of their brand, and it should be second because they started racing. That's like what they were known for originally. So, okay. The fashion side. I don't think it contributes to a lot. I think like it creates an e-commerce portion of their business, but like if I think about these, I'm sure they have retailers and different folks that sell some of their fashion, but I'm sure most of it actually is probably grabbed online. So I went to ferrariofAustin.com. This site is much nicer. I really like the site instantly shows the steering wheel. It shows kilometers per hour. It shows like the sports, the knobs. It kind of creates that luxury experience and an emotional. They have another snapshot of an orange car by the ocean with a nice like they caught some nice lifestyle on the side there. I like this site. This site's quite nice. I think they've really leveraged the deeper level of craftsmanship on this site. Surprisingly, like this site um, is much more optimized than their main Ferrari.com, which is also interesting because like potentially at some point you could have like a dealer search on the main website. I don't know if that's part of their brand promises and their agreements with people, but let's look at the Atlanta website. Atlanta Ferrari dealers. Okay. So they all seem to share some similar elements. This is interesting because this image here on this Atlanta website has a little pixelation. Um, but it has some elements of the Austin website, but the Austin website has more. So let's go to the Fort Lauderdale website. Okay, this one brings a much more emotion. Ooh, I like this one. This one is wonderful. So, showroom and service open now. It has one of the red Ferrari keys. Ferrari at Boca Raton, official Ferrari service. Okay, designed to exceed limits, overcoming every limit. Power meets absolute precision, unlike any other. This is very nice. I really like the Fort Lauderdale. They really did good here, like really good. Okay, this one knocks it out of the park. So let's see. I got Ferrari Mexico I can pull up. I can pull up San Antonio, and I can pull up Tampa Bay. Whoops, I hit directions there. Go up to Tampa Bay. Okay, Tampa's also leveraging this high-end luxury appeal. Okay, this is nice. Mexico City. Hmm, not as much. Has like it has some of these pixelated images. Like they're not bad. It's just like however this hosting set up or the way these images are optimized, they have a little bit of grain to them. And now if I look at the Ferrari of San Antonio, okay, it matches a lot of the Austin. So I don't know if this is state to state. Yeah, so if I look here, San Antonio and Mexico City, like they're two the visual difference is massive in the photo quality. I think the photo quality is like absolutely everything. So, okay, there's somebody that's actually paying attention to this somewhere. Um, this is interesting. I'm sure it would take a lot to make sure that all of this stays on point. Let's look at the Ferrari Vancouver. I wonder if it's going to have any Vancouver branding in it. Nope. Okay, the same thing. They also pixelated images. They're not like totally pixelated, but they definitely have a little bit of that look to them. There's just like that there's a handful of brands here, the handful of these dealerships that I think those little details matter. Like specifically when you're selling a Ferrari.
Troy, stop right there, because what you just mapped across multiple dealership websites is one of the most telling positioning gaps we've found so far. Here's what you actually uncovered. Ferrari's brand promise is built on absolute precision, craftsmanship, and perfection. That's not just marketing language. That's the core emotional contract they have with their buyer. And yet at the dealership level, which as we established earlier is the actual conversion engine, that contract is being broken by pixelated images and inconsistent visual quality. Think about the psychological dissonance that creates. You're about to spend $300,000 or more. You've been emotionally primed by stunning cinematic ads and a beautifully crafted website. And then you land on a dealership page with grainy photos. That's like walking into a Michelin star restaurant and being handed a paper menu. And here's the deeper positioning problem. Ferrari doesn't control that last mile experience consistently. Fort Lauderdale is knocking it out of the park. Mexico City and Vancouver are undermining the brand promise. That inconsistency is a revenue leak because desire that isn't maintained through the entire journey leaks before it converts. So Troy, here's my question. Do you think this is a brand standards enforcement problem? Or is this a deeper issue where Ferrari has deliberately allowed dealerships autonomy in a way that's actually cannibalizing their own positioning?
Hmm. I think it's important for dealerships to have autonomy. However, I think um, it can cannibalize some of the overall branding. So, hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because they are a high-end brand, and I think when you are that luxury touch, like if I look at back to one of these ads, it's the blue car driving through the countryside of Italy. This video doesn't have the highest definition. I think yeah, I think there's something happening at a core level somewhere where you know, you have, I think there's 5,700 people employed. The standards start to leak, and that potentially could affect overall bottom line. But since not everything's on the internet, there's going to be test drives and the emotional experience that happens in person at the dealership. So, like a lot of that in-person marketing will happen at a dealership level. However, you know, really juicing up the ad campaigns to then meet that market's need and like have that flow through that emotional experience online and offline, I think contributes to overall bottom line.
Exactly. And what you just described is actually a full funnel positioning problem, not just a digital one. The online experience should be engineering desire so intensely that by the time someone walks into that dealership, they're not shopping anymore. They're confirming a decision they've already emotionally made. That's the difference between a sales environment and a desire fulfillment environment. But here's the gap. If the online experience is inconsistent at the dealership level, and the add to landing page color continuity is broken, and the fashion line feels disconnected, then what you actually have is a fragmented desire chain. Every break in that chain is a moment where the emotional momentum slows down. And when emotional momentum slows down on a purchase this size, doubt enters, and doubt at $300,000 is very expensive. So Troy, let me bring this together for a second because I think we're starting to see the shape of something here. We've identified three distinct gaps so far. The add to landing page congruence break. The dealership brand, standard inconsistency, and the fashion line disconnect from the core emotional architecture. Here's what I want to ask you now. If you were advising Ferrari's positioning team, which of these three gaps do you think is costing them the most revenue? And which
I,
one
th-
would you fix first?
I think it's the congruence and standards, although it would be such an annoying pain in the butt to enforce. I think that if you have the flow through from the ads to the visuals, like that red Ferrari in the ad that captures my attention, the visual that's red that captures my attention again, that then drives me to the dealership because on the page itself there's a spot to enter your contact information. So I think they're then routing these people to the right dealership, which like makes sense. So mm, because the rest of the page has the red Ferrari, you can tell that that intention was there, but it just didn't seem to follow through. And like even on this landing page, I wouldn't necessarily, they have a photo here, an enduring passion, Ferrari Approved is the only official certification program that guarantees the authenticity of each vehicle. There were 200 checks performed by Ferrari technicians. Okay, that's cool. I don't want to see like I see in this visual, there's a tech working on my car, checking under the hood. Of course, they're verifying it, but like, I think it just like this image doesn't do justice of what they could on this page. I don't necessarily like this blue wrap from based on like what the designs are. I'm just kind of reading off the visuals I see. So I think what I would do is level of standards of congruence and like finding the top, kind of finding and creating like either an award system for like the top Ferrari dealership so then other dealerships can aspire to be that and then making sure that they're leading the charge in the standard that they're setting so then everyone else can see that they're setting a standard because I think this main page has a little bit of inconsistencies across the brand itself.
Troy, that last insight is gold. Let me reflect it back with some precision. What you're describing is essentially a positioning cascade system. You set the gold standard at the top, you make that standard visible and aspirational to every dealership in the network, and then you let status competition do the enforcement work for you. Dealerships compete to be the flagship example. That's brilliant because it removes the enforcement burden and replaces it with desire for recognition. And here's why that matters beyond just aesthetics. When a dealership knows they're being measured against a gold standard that's publicly visible, they self-police. The brand doesn't have to chase compliance. Compliance becomes a status symbol within the dealer network itself. Now, the tech under the hood image you mentioned, that's actually a perfect example of a deeper positioning mistake. Ferrari Approved should feel like a secret society of perfection, not a mechanic's inspection. The emotional frame should be ritual, not process. Think about how Rolex talks about their watchmaking. You never see a technician checking parts. You see the art of precision, the feeling of legacy being passed forward. So Ferrari Approved has the right idea but the wrong emotional frame. It's selling verification when it should be selling immortality of the machine. Troy, given everything we've uncovered today, what's your overall read? Do you think Ferrari is a brand that knows exactly what it's doing and these are calculated trade-offs, or do you think there are genuine blind spots at the strategic level?
I think there's genuine blind spots at a strategic level. I think they do know what they're doing because they're generating healthy revenue. However, I think as a brand ages with time, as the market gets more complex, it's easy to lose your identity. And I think their identity is all they've got. And we seen that with Jaguar months back, where they tried rebranding and tried becoming this brand that it wasn't. And I think if Ferrari's not careful, that will start to bleed into their world if they don't set the standards now when they had a chance to. So that's the video. I'm going to wrap this up here. This is fantastic. I really enjoyed doing this. Drop me a like, drop me a comment, subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to check out Edward, go to positioningexpert.com. If you'd like to work together, you can book me on the page, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.